Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Ethereal Experience. My name's Alex, and
Hey,
I'm your host.
hey, I'm Ian, also your host.
And if you notice, we have a new person here, Chris. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Good morning, guys. My name is Chris Statton. I'm a senior at the University of Oklahoma and double majoring in finance and energy management. And so I'm excited to be on here today with these guys and just talk a little bit about energy and the infrastructure that goes along with it. But yeah, happy to be here. Thank you all for having me.
For
Sweet.
sure. Ian, do you want to tell all of us the quote of the week, and we'll dive into our first piece of homework.
Yeah, you know it. All right. So Chris, and if you don't know, we got this little tradition at this point where we start off a theme with a quote. So the if you don't know, this is like a comedian. His name's George Carlin, big time old school comedian. So the quote of the week is, "The electricity is really just organized lightning." So, haha, it's really clever. I know.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. But
Not wrong.
yeah. So also before we jump right in, Alex or Chris, did y'all get a chance to check out the song from last week called "Slip Away" by what was it? Perfume Genius. That's right. Which I've never heard of that band before until you talked to me about it, Alex. Because like that's a very unique title for a band. But and also I didn't really know the genre like at all.
Yeah. This was actually like a Spotify recommendation, like how they have like the weekly like playlist where you can get recommendations. And whenever I first saw the title of the band, I thought like this is definitely one of those like teenage bands where they just like they didn't even try to name it. Like in Diary of a Wimpy Kid, like the Loaded Diaper Band, like they just were making a name. I was like, oh, Perfume Genius, okay, but the song was freaking dope. I definitely loved it. It was interesting because it mixed like a lot of different like aspects of different genres, like especially the beat is what I really liked because it used like some really cool sonic like modulations, and it also had some good mastering. I was surprised myself whenever I
Yeah.
first heard it, and it sounded like a song that like you could watch a GoPro montage to. Like it was so cool.
Yeah, it was well
Was
like
that
when
on
that
your Spotify Taste Breakers playlist?
I believe so, yeah.
that would make
Okay,
sense
yeah,
because like yeah, for sure. Like I like it was so out there. I'm like I'm used to like just like hip hop being always on the top 10 or some pop song from your top 10 artists. So I was like, wow, that one's like way out there. Because when that chorus hit, I was like, well, that was a change up.
Exactly.
So it was
Chris,
awesome.
did you get a chance to listen to it?
I did not, but y'all are hyping it up so much that I might have to go play it on repeat the
Yeah,
rest of it. So,
for sure.
the broad horizons.
And if you don't know, me and Chris, like, it's funny, like, we almost have like identical playlists. Like, a lot of the songs, whenever we're on trips, like, we'll play it, and then out, like, my phone will run out of battery, and then I'll be like, all right, someone else can play, and then we'll just start hearing the same songs again from
So
Chris.
Yeah,
it's like deja vu
a
over
lot
and
of
over.
the advice of the old Kanye stuff too. So,
Yeah, nice. I'm on that Apple Music grind, so I unfortunately probably couldn't share the recommended with you guys. I'm basic. What can I say? I don't know. But like, what is the reputation, I guess, around Apple Music? Is it like, or the stereotype, I guess, is it like, are you like it? Is it like an Android thing versus iPhone? If you have like Apple Music versus Spotify, I don't
yeah,
know.
which is ironic because Apple Music is obviously like the
Right,
iPhone versus,
right.
but I think that is an app comparison. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Dang it. Well, oh well. Awesome. Well, cool. So I guess we'll just jump right into talking about energy and infrastructure, something that Chris is very familiar with.
Let's do
Um,
it.
yeah, sweet. So, Chris, we're gonna start off with just talking about the state of our energy grid, which is kind of a pertinent topic because all of us are at least either close by or in Texas or have lived in Texas at some point. And so I'm sure all of us remember hearing about the winter storm that happened earlier this year and how it pretty much knocked out like most of the state. And I guess, Alex, I guess we can just go ahead and jump into talking about that real quick if you want.
Yeah, for sure. I was thinking, like, we like, just to preface for people listening, like, we all live in Texas, all three of us. So I mean, we're all actually directly affected by it. I mean, let's just go around and talk about our experience. So I'll go first real quick. This is I have a very short and sweet one, because apparently my part, like where I was at this apartment, was also connected to a hospital. So we were on the same grid line as them. So they didn't shut it off at any moment. So I was chilling, so to speak.
While other people were freezing.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So that was my experience with this tragedy.
Wow. Well, man, lucky.
Mine was similar. I was actually in Norman at the time at OU, but my parents were here, and I think they lost power maybe for about 24 hours. But they live near downtown and near some other critical infrastructure, so I think their section of the grid, they didn't pull the plug on it for very long. But some of my friends, like, they're actually having to go down and like bring their parents back to Oklahoma because their parents had lost power for several days. Like, some of them had grandparents that they had to get out of their homes. They had for a while, and people were turning on their gas stoves just to stay warm, obviously, like running those fire dangers. So it was it was kind of a return to like caveman lifestyle.
It's close.
Yeah.
And I guess for me, you guys sounded like you had some essential businesses near you. The only essential business near me was the Whataburger, like 10 minutes away. So I lost power for I think 3 days. Luckily, like, I had blankets and stuff, and sometimes like the power would like come back on like for an hour. Sometimes I heard some people just didn't have it for just like 3 or 4 days or more straight, which is insane. I don't know how they did that, but I at least had some power, so for a little bit. So like I remember one time out in Dallas anyway, it got to like -1 one night, which is nuts. I don't think I've ever experienced negative temperatures in my life. Like, even in Colorado, when we traveled there a few times, like at least it was above 0. So yeah, that was an interesting experience, but yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, and actually, as a native of Colorado myself, I know even like -1 in Dallas is significantly colder than -1 in Colorado, because in Colorado, at least, like, it's dry. Usually it's sunny. Usually there's no wind, but in Dallas, like, you have that higher humidity, so it's more of a wet cold, and you have probably a little bit more wind. Like, it might be overcast, and so that feels significantly colder than the same temperature.
Right. Oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because every time I travel to Denver, I feel like I'm gonna shrivel up from like just my skin cracking. So I was like, that makes sense. Cool.
And
well, go ahead.
I'm also just on this topic. I didn't realize this until that winter storm hit, but like Texas is like I think that the term is like an electrical island, and that it has its own grid and it's not part of the national grid. I think that was very interesting because, like, come to find out, Texas typically doesn't have enough power and has to buy from Mexico's grid line a lot of times, is what I heard.
Interesting. Yeah, and Chris, like, I guess since we're talking about that now, like, what's your takeaway from like the overall state of the national energy grid, and like where we're at now as far as like technology wise and how advanced we've gotten since like the energy grid, I guess, was established? Like, what's your overall take on it right now?
So yeah, good question, Ian. And I think regarding Alex's point, Texas is fiercely independent. I think that kind of shows up in their power grid too. So you have like the eastern and western grids that are kind of integrated with each other, and then you have Texas grid, which is just kind of an island that's not as well integrated with the other ones. So regarding like moving energy around in power and kind of reallocating, like Texas has less capability to do that, and just given that they're isolated from those other grids. But I guess just regarding the state of the national grid as a whole, I mean, I think a lot of the infrastructure is aging. I mean, you see that come up in Biden's infrastructure plan with a large emphasis on pouring hundreds of billions of dollars into the infrastructure for the power grid. And then something of a more recent consideration that we've seen is just particularly with some of the tensions with China and maybe some of these other nations, like there are lots of cybersecurity concerns, and and this wasn't necessarily the power grid, obviously, but I think it's indicative of what could happen. But earlier in 2021 here with the ransomware attack against the Colonial Pipeline, like the fact that digitally you could shut down a pipeline that's supplying hundreds of thousands of barrels of oil to the East Coast. And I had friends out on the East Coast that were like lining up for gasoline, just like our parents were back in the 1970s during the oil embargo. That was all because of this new digital attack capability that we haven't really seen. So I think there's some fears over whether our grid system is sufficiently protected against that. So that's another consideration. And then you have kind of more isolated considerations, such as the grid in California with lots of aging infrastructure, and it's been responsible for creating wildfires. And so I think, and then another interesting point that we've discussed in some of my classes and some of my readings I've found is that particularly with the rise of distributed generation, with more people having solar panels at their homes, and kind of having a more tenuous reliance on the grid, like when the sun is shining, like they might be fully sufficient with their energy production, and then because of like net back rules, like the grid actually has to buy the extra energy that they produce back from the consumer. But then when the sun isn't shining or at night, the consumer is having to pull from the grid again, and so the grid is seeing like these large fluctuations in terms of the demand, and it can be hard to manage. And then just generally, like you're seeing a greater need for reliable grid, but also at the same time, like maybe less overall demand for it. It's like in terms of financial incentives, like we're having to put more and more money into the infrastructure, but then because we're having more distributed generation, more people putting solar panels and other things out of their homes, like there's not necessarily going to be as much demand on the grid itself, even though we're having to pour a bunch of money into it. So it's kind of an interesting dichotomy there.
And with that, you were talking about the oil, or sorry, the cyber attack on the oil pipeline. And do you foresee, like, if we're able to centralize, I guess, our power, in terms of nuclear energy or some other alternative energy, we could talk about that in a minute, but if we're able to harness enough energy, like in just a few places, and disperse it from there, as opposed to like, sounds like what we have now is we have a lot of different, we have a huge reliance on oil and fossil fuels right now, right?
Yeah, for sure. Not necessarily as much for the electricity grid itself. Oil is primarily just used as feedstock for refineries and then for transportation, and essentially no electricity is generated with oil. Some is from diesel generators, but most of it is a breakdown between coal, natural gas, and then renewables.
Okay.
Gotcha. I have a question real quick. Just to take it back to like the winter storm in Texas. I was curious. They blamed Texas's like energy management for not having the grid prepared and winterized, and like you said, there's like only like a couple. There's like I think like five grids nationally. Are other grids winterized? Like I know certainly in the north they have to be like ready for this type of weather. Is this like do you see nature as being a force that we haven't really conquered in terms of energy protection?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, certainly to your point, I mean, in places like North Dakota, where the average temperature in the winter is always going to be below 32, and you're going to be dealing with high winds and negative temperatures on the daily. They're certainly more prepared for that. I think it was more of just that level of expectation that we didn't have for weather such as what occurred in Texas. And, I think it maybe it was a little bit of a wake-up call to even just some other grids, like for example, Florida, probably would never encounter anything like that, but then they might be thinking, well, like, it wouldn't get as bad as it did in Texas, but what if we have some sort of cold freeze and that comes along every 20, 30 years? And yeah, I think that's just kind of something like the increased volatility of our weather and climate. And this is kind of tangential, but like a lot of my friends are from Houston, and they've said that within the last like 5 years, I think they've had 3 100-year floods. So these flood levels that are only supposed to occur every 100 years are occurring like every other year now. And so it's like, well, maybe we need to adjust our perspective, like what's possible from a weather perspective. And so yeah, to that point, like I think that was a little bit of a wake up call to see if we could build greater and just general like sustainability and reliability into the grid. So I think more like governments are kind of taking a look at that now, like through the regulatory policies as well.
Gotcha. Yeah, that was a good question, Alex.
Because I think the wake up call was crazy because even for me this past week my computer charger died for my laptop, and it made the technology just useless. It's hard for us to comprehend without energy nothing really works actually. Only machinery that's mechanical can really be operated. And it was a wake up call for me, and I can only imagine the people that suffered during the winter storm, how much they realized we need to start thinking about this. Do you think that the new infrastructure bill covers not in terms of politics, but just in terms of policy? Do you think it covers correctly our energy infrastructure?
Regarding the power grid itself and not necessarily energy production, I think it does attach a reasonable weight to what's going on with our power grid. I think everybody could probably agree with the infrastructure bill that there's certainly a need for investment in our energy infrastructure and just updating a lot of it, because a lot of it was built in the 70s or before that. And so yeah, I think investing in energy infrastructure is I think addressed well within the bill. Maybe some of the specifics, such as obviously I think there probably would be a greater need for more oil pipelines and some other things, in addition to continued investment in renewables that maybe aren't being pushed to the extent that would be ideal. But I think the level of spending that's being considered is probably appropriate. I think it's probably just the particular allocation of that spending is maybe the thing that could be debated.
Gotcha.
Nice.
Yeah, and I guess on the topic of energy resources and whatnot, I was reading on, I think that we were citing an article here, but for nuclear energy, I think we all have a basic understanding, or at least have a sort of a fundamental understanding of it obviously generates a ton of power. I think it said a gigawatt or something like that, which I can't equate that very well to how much that is, if I'm being honest. But it seems like that there's not a huge push at least in the US for establishing a nuclear power grid, even though it sounds I think it said 20% of the US is powered roughly.
Around 20%. And
yeah,
and fossil fuels were around 60%.
Right.
And just before we get into the subject, I hope you don't mind, Ian, but I was actually wanting to know, from your education, Chris, Like, did y'all talk at all about like energy propaganda around nuclear?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah.
Yeah, we did. I guess you're just saying like more so things that frame public opinion surrounding nuclear energy.
Mhm,
Yeah, I
yes.
think so. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So, I think I'm an advocate of just energy in general, and finding the best sources of energy, regardless of what maybe the political undertones are. And I come from a lot of background in oil and gas, but personally, like, I'm a huge proponent of nuclear energy because it is very scalable. It's relatively cheap. Uh, I honestly believe it is safe and it's clean. And I think the main, I guess, block that people have and they're thinking is regarding the safety of nuclear energy. And there are issues with like the disposal of radioactive uranium rods, and that's kind of its own discussion. And that is a real like environmental concern, but I think it's one that's also surmountable. But regarding the safety, in the free world, so apart from communist countries, namely USSR, and there's never actually been a single death directly attributed to a nuclear accident. Now, we know, from the Chernobyl accident in 1986, clearly nuclear energy can be dangerous, and if it's not managed well, then yeah, absolutely, it's something we should probably stay away from. But I think the track record of the free world, like the U.S. and like even France, as I'm sure you know, Alex, has had what I deem to be a relatively successful track record with nuclear energy, and albeit France is transitioning away from that, which I honestly believe is a step in the wrong direction. But you hear stories about accidents such as 3 Mile Island, but in the grand scheme of things, obviously, like, there were no deaths directly attributed to that. It was more of just a scare, like, oh, like, we're just reminded that nuclear energy is dangerous, and I think that just kind of points to the media's portrayal of it is a little bit unfortunate. I mean, they know that putting up a headline about the potential for everybody getting killed by radioactivity is probably going to sell a lot more than a headline that's a little more tame. So I think there is an unfortunate stigma behind nuclear energy, and I think you have to realize that all forms of energy are dangerous in some form to the environment and to people. And so I think it's probably most proper to apply like a cost benefit analysis, and I think nuclear energy actually stacks up pretty well, and when compared to some other sources. Now, I think one of the main safety concerns at this point, at least for the U.S., is the disposal of radioactive waste, and that is a real consideration. And I'm not sure if y'all like looked into the Yucca Mountain Waste Repository much, but that
I'm
was like
familiar.
essentially So that was supposed to be a centralized disposal location for nuclear waste in the U.S. And it would have covered our needs for an elongated period of time. And they had chosen a spot where, like, worst case scenario, even if there was some sort of relief, like, it wouldn't negatively impact large swaths of population. And so I personally supported that. I think that was probably the wisest thing to do, and was to kind of centralize that and make sure that we were maintaining a high standards. Now, obviously, from Nevada's standpoint, like, why did you pick us as like the dumping ground for all your waste that's coming from the East Coast or whatever? And so I think that element was probably unfair to a point, but then again, I believe that's also why we have the federal government, to implement policies like that necessarily might not be directly aligned with the particular state's interest, but then for the nation as a whole, and even Nevada in the long run, I think that was probably the best course of action. So I believe that has essentially been killed, like the Yucca Mountain and repository. Right. So I deem that as rather unfortunate. I think it will make it for a steep uphill climb from there for nuclear energy, but still a proponent, and I think there's still some opportunity for growth within it. It's just maybe will be a little bit muted compared to what's possible.
Yeah, and I guess I kind of have a question about, I guess, the fear or the media portrayal of nuclear energy as opposed to like oil, or I keep saying oil, but like natural gas and other forms of energy in this country. Like, why besides, of course, I guess Chernobyl, why do you think there is so much push against nuclear energy besides what the media is saying? Like, is there a underlying component? Is there like a industry politics kind of thing going on? Or
Yeah,
I can answer that real quick.
I mean,
yes,
I think
money.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, that's probably the root of it at the end of the day in some sense. But I also think just like from a straight technological perspective, I mean, I think there is a need for greater literacy among the populace. And, it's important to understand that, we think of nuclear energy like, oh, like atom bomb, like same thing, right? It's like, no, I mean, essentially the technology is fundamentally different in that it's actually like, even in a worst case scenario, it's literally impossible for a nuclear reactor to explode in the same way that an atom bomb would. Now, you obviously have the risk of meltdowns, and that's the thing that people are worried about. But, you're not going to have that explosion releasing, a mushroom cloud 200 miles into the air. And that's not even a possibility with it. So I think a lot of people would say, oh, yeah, I think that, like a nuclear facility could explode and just like decimate the cities around it. That's not possible. With Chernobyl, we know that it is possible for a meltdown and like a release of dangerous elements. But I think there's just greater literacy needed to understand what is nuclear energy, how is it created through fission, and what procedures are in place. And obviously, I think an element of it too is like Chernobyl and some of these other incidents, even Fukushima on a lesser extent. Like we see them portrayed in the media, and it's like, oh wow, like this is going to happen again to us,
Right.
And we bring this to the U.S. or bring it on a greater scale worldwide. So I think it's maybe just like a lack of general understanding about the technology itself, rather than like a true danger behind it.
Gotcha.
And I certainly agree, because like I think an important point that not a lot of us realize is that whether we know it or not, like the U.S. has been investing heavily and is utilizing nuclear energy, not necessarily for the civilian public. Like take for example, we have submarines and we also have aircraft carriers, and those are both powered by nuclear reactors. And I mean, we don't know like what technology exactly they're using, whether it's fission, fusion. It's all very classified, very hidden. But we do know that the only problem with this type of technology is that there's humans involved. Like, for example, the nuclear submarines, they could be underwater for as long as they want, and they don't need refuel on their uranium for, I think it was something crazy like 32 years. But the only problem is wow. that they have humans that need to go up to get food and receive food to be stocked every, I think, 4 months or something like that. But the numbers are a little shaky, but the principle is that like we are using nuclear energy heavily for our defense, but we're not using it necessarily for the civilian public. And with Chernobyl, like I totally understand, like because we recommended people to watch the TV series from HBO, Chernobyl, and it's incredibly scary because like this incident, if it was not properly taken care of, it could have leaked into multiple like spheres of influence. And like there's something really scary about it. I think that the scariest idea was this thought called the or not, it was called the elephant's foot. Are either of you two familiar with that?
I don't think so.
Yeah, from the show anyway. Yeah, I'm not by any means like a nuclear expert. I just know that it's like from what I remember, it's a giant like chunk of like radioactive material that's just continues to like spurting out a bunch of radioactive elements, and it's just but it's like a huge concentrated part of it.
Exactly.
I don't remember why like it was so dangerous, like why that part, like what it was, it from a rod or something? I can't remember.
It was the densely packed like carbon rods. And,
okay.
I think the rods are another material. I might be mistaken.
That's where like my knowledge like drops, but
but like the scary thing about like the elephant's foot is that there was like it would take some crazy amount of time for it to cool down, and it wasn't cooling down, and it kept going deeper and deeper. And there was the fear that what happens when this radioactive material reaches like the underground aquifers and it starts going around the world. So like that's a pretty scary idea, but I think that it's important for us to certainly learn more, and we've seen nuclear power work in our like submarines and ships, and I don't understand why that can't translate to the civilian world. Chris, you mentioned France, like they are heavily invested in nuclear because they don't have any natural resources here. They don't like they have coal, but it's just too difficult to mine the way that it's formed. And so Germany was on a national, like talking globally, Germany was like really invested in nuclear until they got that pipeline from Russia, and now they're moving away from it. Recently, France announced that they are pushing for more nuclear, and they are on board with that. And I think like there's a bunch of potential, and nuclear energy is surprisingly like the best form of energy that we have. In your opinion, Chris, the push with like all the renewable stuff, like it's energy output and like electrical baseline, like it as well as reliability is. I see it as kind of like just part of the portfolio, part of a diverse portfolio of energy. Do you see it as being like a main player in the future, or where do you see renewable fitting in?
I mean, ideally, I would see nuclear, like in the long run, being 50 to 100 years out. Ideally, I'd see nuclear as being, maybe the mainstay of our energy portfolio. I think we should keep energy just that. We should probably keep it a portfolio, and just to like continue to have other sources and like allow for technological innovation to occur within those other production methods. I think with nuclear, obviously most of the issues at this point probably are political. I think from a cost basis, nuclear energy is relatively cheap, and it's scalable. Theoretically, it would be capable of supplying the lion's share of our energy needs. Like if we made the permitting process a little bit I guess less unbearable. So there's a very strict permitting process, at least in the US, as well as Europe and some other places. It's very hard and costly to build a nuclear plant, not because of like the actual cost of construction itself, but rather because of the regulatory hurdles and burdens that are placed on it. That like nuclear energy right now is actually prohibitively expensive. We haven't built a ton of new nuclear reactors at all in the last decade or two. Most of those have been built in 60s, 70s, 80s, and those kind of low. After that, not because the cost of energy production itself with nuclear was rising, but rather just the all-in cost of getting it permitted and overcoming regulatory obstacles. Like that all-in cost has made nuclear energy just prohibitively expensive, at least to build nuclear. So that's essentially where the energy lies. And I guess, seeing how that fits into the matrix with portfolio of renewables, I think nuclear energy is certainly a good source of baseload power. And so, I guess generally have like two types of power. You have baseload and peak load. And baseload is just kind of that like reliable, heavy hitter that's going to bring like the majority of the energy that can be needed at any given time. And then even during the day as well as during the seasons, like there's both like daily and seasonal fluctuations of energy demand. And so in order to like kind of meet those peaks, you kind of need like some other source of electricity that can be quickly vamped up to meet that. And so natural gas and coal have fit those roles relatively well, because with natural gas plant, like you can just turn on a switch and then you're suddenly producing more energy. The one downside of nuclear is that, according to my understanding, I think it is more difficult for it to function as a source of baseload electricity in terms of meeting those peaks. Like it obviously takes time to fire up the nuclear reactors and generate more output. So I think when you pair that with the intermittency of renewables, like that could potentially be a dangerous combination, because you know that with renewables, they're inherently intermittent. And whether you're talking about wind or solar, like, you know, the wind is always blowing and the sun isn't always shining. I think really, like, I mean, I know you hear like buzzwords about semiconductors and energy storage, but those really are, like, they should be the buzzwords. Like, I think that's really where, yeah, that's kind of the blockade in that regard, I guess. And it's like, if we could produce just a ton of nuclear energy or renewable energy, what it might be, and store that in a repository, and then draw from that when there's, you know, greater demand from those peaks, then yeah, like a combination of nuclear and you know, renewables without natural gas or without coal, like, that would be feasible. But right now, like, we do need this, you know, I guess, heat-based energy sources, like, you know, burning coal, burning natural gas, and we do need those because those are by far, in a way, like the best sources of peak-load electricity. Which I think going forward, as we're seeing like greater fluctuation in energy demand, like that will actually become even more important. So all that to say, like, it is possible. Nuclear, you have regulatory issues, and then together with renewables, like, you have the issues of, you know, base load electricity not being able to meet peak load and energy storage. So those are probably the key issues there.
Gotcha.
Real quick, I think your microphone is rubbing across the zipper and it's like making the clicking noises.
Oh, okay. I thought that was me. My bad. Okay. I thought that was me this whole time. Okay, cool.
So keeping on the subject of nuclear, we recommended an article from Yale, and its title was "Why Nuclear Power Must Be a Part of the Energy Solution and for the Environmentalist Problem with Climate Change and whatnot." And I found it surprising how, like, clean nuclear was compared to all of these other forms. Like, I think it's really important for us to understand. For example, here's one of the big takeaways is that nuclear power releases less radiation into the environment than any other energy source. And like, they were talking about how coal itself has trace amounts of uranium, and it like, to the point where some countries, after they burn the coal and they have like the ash, they are pulling uranium out of that. They're getting some uranium out of that as a secondary source of power. Like, that was so surprising to me, is that, like, we don't really think about radiation besides nuclear, but these other sources have radiation, and they're actually pretty terrible comparably.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. And, you know, kind of reverting back to our previous discussion about maybe the general view of energy and the media's portrayal and our society's perspective of it. Like, I mean, I think people forget, like, humans are radioactive. Like, so many things in our world are radioactive. It's just more a matter, like, okay, well, what level of radioactivity can we tolerate? Like, obviously, you're not going to, you know, get cancer from being around another human because you're radioactive. I think it's just more like a concentration in, you know, with nuclear energy. Like, I think they have proven that they can keep that radioactive concentration below, like, a dangerous level, like, and below, like you said, below even levels maybe from some other energy sources, as long as it's managed effectively. So I think that does kind of point to, like, the folly of some of that. It's like, yeah, like, just being radioactive doesn't mean that something's inherently bad, because, you know, even humans, some of the other things are radioactive.
True. Yeah. I always remember, like, watching, like, TV whenever I was younger. I don't know if y'all remember this, but there is, like, a moment where people start switching to, like, the one ear wireless, like, earphones, and, like, people are freaking out, like, it's going to cause radioactivity because it's so close to your brain, you're going to get cancer.
Are you talking about like the Bluetooth one, the over the ear one?
Yeah, that wraps around the ear. Yeah.
Okay, maybe it's just me, but like every time we went to a grocery store or something, there was always like a mom that like had one for some reason.
And she was like talking on the phone with someone through it.
Right. Yeah. And that was just a side note. I don't think she'll be radioactive from it, but it was just funny to watch.
And it always leads to that awkward interaction where you think someone's talking to you, but then you realize that they have their earpiece.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good point. But yeah, I guess we kind of touched on it already, but do you see any other besides nuclear, like really promising future energy sources out there, like, I don't know, next 20, 30 years? Because it sounds like nuclear seems to be the big promising one, but there are others that you think might help enhance
Yeah,
that.
and maybe one that's less technologically and certainly economically feasible right now is actually gas hydrates. And y'all might have seen some about that, but these are reserves that are essentially like stored in the depths of the ocean. Just, you know, like lots of organic matter collects on the bottom of the ocean through the passage of time. And you know, as plants and animals die, like the remains are kind of sitting on the bottom of the ocean, and then much like the process that occurs with the formation of oil and, you know, with, you know, burial pressure, heat, some of those things actually occur at the bottom of the ocean with those organic compounds that are down there. And so it forms gas hydrates, which, you know, if we could just pick it up out of the ocean and use it, like that would be, you know, a great source of energy and similar to natural gas. Obviously, location-wise, it's very hard to extract, and there's some, you know, technological limitations there. But I think it is promising, just because I think the overall like reserves of gas hydrates that we have, you know, are on the order of 2 or 3 times our total, you know, reserves of coal and natural gas combined.
Whoa.
And so theoretically, like that could meet our energy needs, you know, for an elongated period of time. I mean, I don't exactly know the numbers, but certainly like a century or two. So it's like, wow, like, you know, there's some potential there. Obviously, there's some major technological hurdles, and then even if, you know, it probably is getting close to being technologically feasible, but then obviously from a cost standpoint, you know, it's not on par with some of these other sources that we have. So that's kind of one that you know, I've been privy to. I'm sure there's some others, and you know, just continued investment in like obviously nuclear, then renewables, such as wind and solar. And you know, I'm also a fan of hydropower, but you know, hydropower is inherently limited by geographical and considerations. Like, you know, in the U.S. at least, we've already dammed up, you know, probably the majority of the rivers that could be easily used for that purpose. Obviously, we're seeing lots of growth in China just because, you know, they're going through kind of an energy transition and an energy growth stage where they're just, you know, kind of capturing that low hanging fruit. But yeah, I mean, that's probably, gas hydrates are probably the one I would say is like that new, like shiny one that could be worth something in the end, but that has a big asterisk. So
Gotcha. Yeah,
going along with that,
go ahead.
I actually for one of my classes I studied some like ideas for the future in terms of energy. Are either of y'all aware of a professor named Freeman Dyson?
I know the
not
vacuum.
The vacuum cleaner.
No, not the vacuum cleaner. No, not the vacuum. But no, he had this really cool conceptual idea, and it's basically a lot of like future visionaries are looking towards it for like the next era of civilization, and it's called the Dyson sphere. And so basically what it is where we have like a source of energy such as the sun or any other type of like impulse, and we capture all the energy by completely completely encapsulating it and capturing all the energy. And so like I thought that was really interesting.
Cool.
Yeah, that was a conceptual idea he had, but he actually I read one of his lectures, and what he recommended is that we do biological engineering, and we take these energy crops, which for people that don't know, energy crops are essentially crops like corn or cannabis that have some production of ethanol inside of them, and it gets distilled and used as fuel later on. And he recommended that we should take crops and energy crops specifically, and we should biologically engineer them to be as photovoltaic as possible, which means like to capture sun's energy and transfer type of storable energy. And so I thought that was really interesting because I never really thought about like corn being a form of energy that we could use, but learning about energy crops and just in general, like the fact that there's so many that range in the percent of efficiency. It was interesting to me.
Yeah, I thought I heard about the Dysons for maybe once or twice, but obviously I know that's probably far-fetched for now, but that's cool though. That's really cool.
Yeah, and I think that kind of brings up the point that it might be useful to keep in consideration of. Yeah, I think it's easy to be pessimistic about the outlook for energy production and our growing energy demands, and then at the same time, like inherently struggle to meet those energy demands. But no, I think that humans are inherently innovative, and I think we're adaptable. We've been able to live on this planet for so long, so I think there is potential for like these new technologies to be developed that we can't even imagine right now. And, for example, like in the late 1800s, like you were using kerosene lamps to provide light. Like you could not have even conceived that you'd be using electric lights with it, and you'd be driving a car powered by gasoline rather than coal. So I think humans are inherently adaptable and inherently innovative. So I think that trend will continue because it's continued for thousands of years. And so all of the positive thing to extract from all that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, you can't get stuck in the mud with like the present. Yeah, I like that.
And ironically enough, like most of the problems we have with technology are solved by further technology.
You're not wrong. Yeah, that's a good point.
Do y'all want to cut to a commercial break real quick?
Yeah, I'm down.
Good.
All right. Alex, did you want to start out with the first bullet point we got here? Did you want to kind of mix it up a little bit?
Well, since tomorrow is Christmas Eve, let's go ahead and talk about some ridiculous Christmas traditions we have in our family. So do you want me to go first?
I mean, you introduced it, man. You got to start us out.
All right, this one's it's not that big of a deal. It's just kind of ridiculous. And basically, in our family, whenever we have a Christmas tree, we have like an ornament that looks like a pickle, and it's green, and you try to hide it in the Christmas tree, and someone has to find it.
Ornament? It's not a Rick and Morty thing, right?
No. This is like generations old.
Okay, just making sure it wasn't a recent development.
I like it.
Yeah.
I guess mine. And this year, I think we've actually failed on this tradition because we're not spending Christmas in Colorado. We're actually in Dallas currently. But when we're in Colorado, we try to get like a real Christmas tree. And I don't know if y'all have ever seen the movie Christmas Vacation, but I think in some ways,
National Lampoons.
Yeah, my dad embodies the energy of Chevy Chase in some ways, of going out and getting the absolute biggest tree that will feasibly fit in our house. So I think we have like 14-foot ceilings in our living room. So I think we typically try to shoot for like a 13.5-foot.
Oh my God.
A couple times,
I guess you obviously use a ladder or something, right, to decorate that, because that's crazy.
Yeah, we have to use like a ladder and just like transporting it home is sometimes like the funniest thing ever. In the past, we've used just like our SUV, and so it's like the Chevy Chase image of like the tree like hanging down like in both ends of the car,
going over the whole entire.
But then I think we collected our marbles and eventually started to use a trailer, but it's just a little excessive, but the Christmas spirit is a good one to have. So I think it's well placed effort.
Yeah, definitely.
I love it.
Yeah, we're definitely not that level of Christmas dedication there, but we're pretty cookie cutter with most things, I'd say, except for like it's almost like a curse. It's not a tradition where I swear every year where it gets like really cold, like this year in Texas, it's actually gonna be pretty warm, I think. But like whenever it gets down to like freezing temperatures, of course you light a fire, right? If you have a chimney. So we always have this starter log that my dad tries to use, and at least in the past, and it never lights. Like every year, we always try to get like the best one. That fire never lights. It takes like an hour every year to try to light up that stupid fire. So I mean, it's not as exciting as a giant tree in the house, but it's a curse more than anything. So I kind of brought down the Christmas spirits, maybe, but it's just facts, man. It's just facts.
That's fun. Something you can always count on.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, so you brought up I think a minute ago may have brought up the Guinness World Records. We did this last time, and I thought it was a cool idea just to keep it going because I forget just how, I don't know if y'all ever like got one of those books, like the Guinness World Record books. But there's some crazy individuals out there, and in good ways and bad, I guess. But the one I have is a kind of a doozy. But I guess I can start out since you started out, Alex, if you're good with that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Cool. So this guy named Donald Gorski in 2017, as of 2017, has eaten a total of 29,000 Big Macs, and which is rough. He's rough. No, well, that's the crazy thing. He's like really thin. I don't know if he just gets his steps in.
That's true.
Metabolism.
I believe that completely. So here's something crazy about like McDonald's specifically. You can eat the worst stuff from there, but you can lose weight because your body, like, from what I understand, is like your body gets all this crap, and it's like, well, what are we gonna do with it? Like, they don't even, like, your body's like trying to figure out what to do with it. And to tag along to that, whenever I was working at Hobby Lobby, there was a high school, like a teenager that was trying to be friends with me, and he was talking to me about how he was going into the army and that he was too fat to go to the army. So what he said he was going to do is he was going to eat McDonald's every day straight for 3 months before his recruitment date. And
What?
and I didn't check on if it worked, but he was telling me in the past 3 weeks he had lost like 4 pounds. And I was like, bro, I don't know what you're thinking, but you're taking years off your life right there.
From
Like,
eating McDonald's.
Yeah, like there's so many better ways to lose. Yeah, that's just my personal opinion. I'm not a doctor or anything. But
Yeah, I don't know if McDonald's is keto friendly. I doubt it.
I doubt it's health friendly. Period.
Yeah.
But
have you ever
diet.
seen the time lapse where like it's a McDonald's French fry inside a glass container,
yeah,
and next to it there's a normal potato fry? That's like, how does this thing last longer than like half the animals on like the planet? Like,
It's got like a radioactive decay of like 7,000 years.
yeah, it's like it's got a half-life.
Half-life, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. But
All right,
so how about you, Alex? What do you got?
yeah, I'll go ahead. So I'm not gonna tell you it completely. I just want you to guess. So I'm curious what y'all are gonna think because this was surprising to me. I didn't believe it at first. So the highest vehicle mileage. So first, guess how many miles?
Is it diesel? Because diesel tends to last a long time.
I believe it's gasoline.
It's gas. Okay.
Is this like, okay, did they replace the engine or what kind of maintenance is going on? I mean, theoretically, you could rebuild a car like piece by piece
that's
every
a good
time,
point.
and then it's like not even the same car, but it could still run.
Yeah, that's
I'm
a good
not gonna
point.
lie, I don't have the car fact. First, let's just start with the car then.
Well,
What car do you think it is? That'll make it easier.
maybe
Toyota. Yeah, or a Honda maybe.
because I
Okay,
know there was a Tundra like that I think over 6 or 7 years had 1 million miles put on it, and really like, the only work that they did was like changing the oil. I think it maybe blew a belt and then like one other thing, but like no engine overhaul, nothing, like 1 million miles put on this thing. So I'm assuming it's going to be well over that. But
All right, I'm curious now. You gotta break it to us, man.
I'm just
I'll go
gonna
with
spill all the
4.
beans.
I'll go with 4 million.
Yeah, I'll go with 3, just to
Okay.
round it out.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So just to state, I don't know if they rebuilt this thing or anything like that, but I believe that it was just vanilla. From what the article like said, they didn't mention any type of work on it, but it was a 1966 Volvo 1800S,
What?
Okay.
and it was 3,039,122 miles.
Oh,
Jeez.
we got it.
Man,
That's
that is
crazy.
like 3 million. Like that's like most that could be like half a lifetime right there, like a person's lifetime. That's crazy.
Do you know, like, was that passed down like from a generation to the next? Like, you
I
kinda
know.
So they stated that it was because of like a lot of it was day to day, because he was like traveling for his work and also for other reasons, but he was just putting on the miles year to year because he stayed in the same type of work and kept the same car.
Wow. I mean, that's
But
wild.
I mean, I would have guessed the Toyota because I mean, the videos of the Toyota Hilux, like that thing could go through like a tsunami and survive. But
Yeah,
a
I've seen
Volvo, I was
videos.
like, what?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I wouldn't picture that. That's crazy. But so the last one we have is just a dog story. Like I think all 3 of us have at least had a dog in the past. So Chris, do you want to? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but do you have a crazy story about your pup?
Well, I just have one dog now. I used to have 2. We lost our dog Baron last
Oh,
year,
Right.
but he died of natural causes. But he did a lot of unnatural things in his lifetime that theoretically in other dogs probably should have led to death. But I remember he he was an English black lab, and labs just love getting into things and eating anything under the sun. So I believe one time he ate, and he was actually said that the English labs are a little bit smaller than like an American lab, like standard. There's not, I mean, it's like a big dog, but not like a mastiff or anything. But he could put it away. So I think one time he ate a whole loaf of bread that we had left out in the garage. And then like he was fine. And then another time he ingested like 2 capsules of rat poison, and we're like, oh yeah, like, he's gonna die.
Oh my
And
god.
he had some tummy troubles, but then pulled through. And then then like our dogs also, like both of them, our other dog is a Labradoodle, so he also has that Labrador gene. But both of them would love to just like not chew on napkins, but just like eat them, like swallow them in one bite. And so whenever we're sitting around the dinner table, and Alex can attest to this with Shiloh because he's been over there
that's
half the
true.
times, but
Yeah.
Shiloh will come up and like your napkin will be in your lap, and he'll kind of like sneak up and snatch your napkin and then just like swallow it, and it's gone. Like you got to go get another one. So
I've
yeah,
never that is a unique animal.
Yeah, he likes getting his carbs, so his fiber.
So what you're saying is he's like that Volvo of dogs.
Just in dog form, yeah. He's got some mileage on his stomach.
Wow, that's honestly impressive. I mean, obviously, rest in peace to the doggo, but that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, they were tanks.
Yeah, that's awesome. Alex,
Got the iron stomachs.
yeah, for real. How about you, Alex?
I'll go ahead and tell mine. Mine's pretty good. So I have a big golden retriever named Cooper. That dog's like 120 pounds. He's humongous. So because he was so big, whenever we were living in my mom's house, we sometimes let him outside, like in the backyard for the day. It's like he didn't have enough room to do anything in this house because it was so small. And so we'd leave him in the backyard with like a bowl for some food, and then like a bucket with a handle and for water. And it was kind of a really fun thing for me at the end of the day to come home from school, and we're driving past our backyard, and you know how like whenever you drive past a picket fence you can kind of see inside because you're going so fast in between the cracks.
Yeah.
And so one day, whenever I was like, me and my mom, we were driving to our home and we were pulling into the garage. We were driving past the backyard, and Cooper was sitting in the middle of the backyard with the bucket on his head. It had gotten stuck because the handle went behind his head and it got stuck. And he didn't know what to do.
Well, I'm glad you came by.
Absolutely. And like whenever I got out of the car and like slammed the door to like walk up to the gate, he heard us and you could just hear the bucket going like back and forth as he was running to
Honestly, I've never owned a golden, but I've been around them. That sounds just like something they would do.
That's funny.
That's awesome.
It was so funny, the look, because it was just like he didn't even know that he existed anymore. He was just stuck in this bucket.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But going back to your story, Ian. But before you say this, can we go ahead and talk about your football?
Oh, the football. So, Chris, you've interacted with the football, right? The little Chihuahua. Do you remember that dog?
Yeah, yes. What was her name?
It was Sadie. Yeah.
Sadie.
So she's still here. She's actually like sleeping.
Okay.
She's actually
talking about her in the past tense. And I was
Yeah. No. She's still here.
Okay.
She's still she's still kicking.
Gone, not forgotten.
Yeah. No. She's still here. She's actually sleeping on the floor right now.
When you first said the football, I thought you were referring to like isn't that what they call like the briefcase that they carry around with like the nuclear codes or something? So, like the president
I'm trying to like
a nuclear attack. I was like,
I
was like, wow, you have experience with this?
No. Like, yeah, we're just winding it all the way back to nuclear energy. No. So the football is the nickname we give to my dog. She's a little overweight. I'm not gonna lie. She's like a Chihuahua mix. I don't even know how many breeds she has in her. She's just she's short and fat. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. A really sweet dog for the record. But anyway, she has her set of quirks, and one of them is that I don't know why, but like sometimes when I call her to go outside, like to just use the restroom or whatever, she'll come up to me and just like roll over and like just want her belly to be scratched. So one time, like it was late at night and I forgot to let her out one night. And she was really tired. I kind of pushed her along, tried to get her to go outside. And I kid you not. So I was like, hey, Sadie, go outside. And she just rolls over kind of like this. And I'm like, all right, no, I don't have time for this. And so I try to gently roll her back over. And then she just rolls over again on the other side. And so we're just doing like this series of rolling just to try to get over to the door. Cause I didn't want to try to like shove her out or anything like that. So it was just like this. I'm just glad there weren't any neighbors looking at me because they'd be like, what is wrong with your dog?
They'd be calling PETA.
Yeah. She just kept rolling over. I'm like, dude, what are you doing?
Had a sausage rolled the dog to
it pretty much. No, that's essentially what it was. It's like I was like, this is embarrassing. Like, what is happening? Oh man. But my other dog, my lab, I don't know where he went, but he's a little more normal. I would say he balances the two out a little bit. So
love that.
I had something that I want to talk about real quick before we go further into the sections of the podcast. I'm curious from all of what you've learned, Chris, can you go ahead and explain us your take on like the climate crisis, not in a political sense, but just like from what we know factually and what you've seen in the industry and readings?
Yeah, and obviously not a climatologist. I might not have the most informed perspective, but I think the evidence clearly is there that climate is changing, like sea levels are rising, and I think really where the debate probably stems from that is is it man-made? Are we exacerbating it or causing it? Or like, are we just a drop in the bucket? And that's probably the point to where yes, like we should be stewards of our carbon output. But I think to a large sense, I think we might overestimate the impacts that we can have on climate versus like natural cycles. So, in some of my like geology classes, we looked at climate over long geologic periods and the fluctuations in sea level, like sea levels, temperatures, glacial periods, like those changes are just so much more significant on such a much larger scale than what we observe today. That like we might just be in one of those periods where the climate is changing because of some of those, like they call them like meta cycles that are honestly beyond our control. And so I think the question is like, well, are we causing it? Are we just simply making it worse, or do we really just have no impact on where the climate is going? So, to that point, I think yes, like there's a need for like gathering evidence into the scene, like increased carbon output because of the combustion of fossil fuels, like that actually like having such a discernible impact on, or is it more natural? It's like honestly, even just with volcanic eruptions, like a single volcanic eruption can release hundreds of times the amount of CO2 that our combustion does in the US. And I think we just sometimes get lost in the scale of natural long-term geologic processes that have a particular effect on. So, I think I probably won't get too far into the technicals because I'm probably not to speak to those. But I think just from a general perspective, maybe the good takeaway is that yes, if we should be stewards of our energy resources and be cognizant of the effects that they may have, but we should also be cognizant of the effects that they might not have, and we should be vigilant about what our energy policies are doing for people. Like I think we should hold humans as our standard of value rather than the environment itself. Like whatever we can do to benefit humans and bring more people out of poverty and give them greater energy security and energy usage, because there's clearly like direct correlations between life expectancy, quality of life, standard of living, and energy usage. And we still have billions of people on this planet that I think there's like 2 billion people on the planet that still don't have reliable access to electricity or clean water. And so I think if we have to sacrifice maybe a bit of like the environmental goals that we've set for the sake of bringing those people out of poverty, like I think that's a trade-off that we should make. But then again, I think there are like probably some better ways to do it. Like, well, for example, China is actually currently building 300 coal plants across the world that they're funding. So not necessarily just within China, but they're building coal plants in the Middle East, they're building coal plants in Africa. And so essentially these other nations are going to become reliant on China for not only the technology, but also their coal production. And, I think coal was great and it served its purpose, but it's clearly not the most clean burning. Like I think natural gas is greatly superior to coal, but with these developing countries, they're like, hey, that's unfair for the developed countries to say, hey, y'all need to go straight from where you are to these more expensive like renewables. Like, no, like, we want to have our fun time. Like we want to go through and like use our coal resources and kind of vamp all that up quickly without regard for the environment. So I think you have some things like that where it's like, yeah, like I think we probably should exercise maybe some better discretion in terms of those energy sources that we're using. But yeah, regarding climate as a whole, like I think it is just the cost benefit analysis at the end of the day. Like, we need to weigh the potential effects that we're having on the environment with the benefits that energy does bring. And I think the benefits are very clear of what greater energy usage brings.
Gotcha.
Going along with that, like, so what I think an interesting thing that I learned and that I looked at with climate change is like the glaciers and ice in Antarctica are melting, and that's rising sea levels. And because of those rising sea levels, as well as like problems with the atmosphere and emissions, the Earth is getting hotter, right? So it's destroying like coral reefs and other environments. But I think it's also interesting is like, what do we expect to happen with with Antarctica and the glaciers? Like, do we think they're gonna not like ever become water? And like what do they expect with the glaciers and all the ice that's present in the oceans? Because it has to melt at some point, right?
Yeah, and regarding that, I'm honestly not as sure. And but I mean, I guess the one thing that we do know is that we have gone through these cycles of glacial activity, and you know, I mean, like for example, during like the Cretaceous period, like we had an order of like 3 to 5 times the amount of CO2 in our atmosphere. And there's a significant greenhouse effect, and like the glaciers had all essentially melted, except for very isolated ones here and there. But then, like since then, like there was a subsequent ice age, like a glacial age after that, where then like a lot of the water, like, sea level had dropped significantly, and then now we're kind of in this like in between. So yeah, I think we probably won't see like an alarming rate per se, but like I think sea levels are always going to be changing regardless of whether or not it's been caused by the warming of the atmosphere from man-made causes. And so yeah, to that point, I'm not really sure like the scientific principles behind it, but I just feel like that's something that's probably just always going to be a point of safety.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a good
Yeah,
question.
and like because I've read like Japan is very vulnerable, and they're going to be having problems in the future because of the rising sea levels. They're losing square feet area for their land. And I mean, take for example, like humans, and like especially in America, like we're all along the coast, so like the higher the water levels, the more problems we're going to have with relocation and redistribution of infrastructure. I think that was very interesting because I mean we have the environmental aspect, but then like when you tackle along the human aspect, it's like, well, we just built all this and now we're gonna have to abandon it.
Yeah, again, I mean, I might build an appeal to human ingenuity once again. I mean, if you look back into like the 1600s when the Dutch basically reclaimed all the land from the sea and Holland, and you know, the fact that they could do that with the very limited technology that they have, really just earthen dikes and mounds of dirt, and the fact that they could do that at that point in time, I think, we have time. It's not like there's a tidal wave coming for the coast.
Right.
We have time to implement new technology, and it might be expensive. It might be a point of infrastructure spending that we should incorporate into our outlook. But I don't necessarily have a doomsday perspective on that either.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like the gradual progression doesn't mean that we're all hope is lost. We can in the meantime come up with solutions since it's a potential long-term problem. So that's a good point.
Yeah, and I guess I will say like probably the most vulnerable populations are those that live in developing countries that might not have like the resources or the infrastructure to combat that.
Right.
So, for example, in Bangladesh, I think I read somewhere that about 30 million people are expected to be displaced by 2030 or something, because of increased flooding and rising sea levels and monsoons and all that stuff. And I think those are the populations that are most vulnerable. So, in terms of finding solutions for those, developing countries, it would be more difficult to provide that.
Right. Gotcha.
I have kind of maybe a bad perspective on this, but personally, I think it might be smart for like relocation, because like take for example like Tornado Valley and like Texas and Oklahoma, like we know there's going to be tornadoes frequently there. Why would we build there? And like I mean I guess a better example would be Haiti. Like we should not have people on Haiti because there's going to be an earthquake that will destroy everything, and it will come frequently. So I mean, I wonder if like a lot of this climate change stuff it doesn't necessarily need to be solved in terms of technology, but maybe just in terms of better geographical planning.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying almost like survival of the fittest, except from a geographic location perspective, like Chris was.
Well, no. I mean that the people that are vulnerable and in danger should be in a better place.
That's what I was saying. I wasn't saying like for the people themselves. I was just saying for maybe some locations just aren't ideal to be living in, and so maybe we need to move elsewhere. Which I mean, I guess it's been a trend that we've endured throughout the existence of humanity. But that's probably nothing new. It's just a little disconcerting to think that we might have to move people away from areas where they've lived for so long.
Right. Yeah. I'm trying to think of any other questions I had about that, but I don't know off the top of my head. But how about you, Alex? Did you have anything?
Yeah, I did have a question.
Okay.
So with our energy and infrastructure, like Ian, I'm sure you're well aware of Moore's law, which is essentially like the time for the amount of semiconductors to double is like a recurring process, and it has like the hockey stick graph, like where it's just like it exponentially increases, and we have semiconductors and transistors that are close to the size of atoms. Like, where do you see with all this digital explosion our energy kind of going towards in terms of supply and demand?
I guess if you want to throw on that, that'd be good too. But that's a good question. So, and I think the buzzword in generation and transmission and energy usage right now is efficiency. I mean, traditionally, like if you look at an incandescent light bulb from energy and production, what I think regardless of whether it's the source, whether it's coming from natural gas, like once you have that electricity and you're transporting it, and like you're stepping up the voltage, you're stepping it down through transmission lines, through your house, through the bulb itself. I think there's I believe there's a 1.3% efficiency conversion of that initial energy to the energy that you're actually getting out of the light bulb. Right? And a lot of that is obviously lost as heat, not only in the light bulb itself, but also along the transmission lines. And we have taken steps to mitigate that by having our transmission lines carry electricity at such high voltage and to reduce the resistance we're facing. So, with that, if we could even just eke out incremental gains in efficiency, that would have a huge result. And I think that's where there's so much research and effort being put into the development of semiconductors, because those would just transform that, especially if we could get that on a large scale that's economical. And so I think that's why there is so much research being put into that. I think that's part of that excitement of human ingenuity. Right. In terms of, I'm not necessarily apprised to what the actual outlook is for development times, or when people are saying we might actually be able to implement that. On the Ian, if you have some insight regarding that.
But, a little bit. I mean, that's why there's such a. You probably heard about the influx of quantum computing and how people are trying to come up with a race essentially to create a commercialized quantum chip, if you want to call it that, where you have multiple bits that can be calculated all at once instead of a binary system where it's zeros and ones. And so I think there will be, I don't know, I personally don't know the limit to when semiconductors will reach maximum, like you said, efficiency. But I know that quantum computing is definitely trying to displace the traditional semiconductor microchip, the processor, and RAM and things. Well, not RAM, but GPUs and CPUs types of processor chips. And when you have quantum computing, I mean, that blows everything else out of the water, because you can essentially break down any traditional encryption code that is meant to store passwords. It can decipher huge amounts of data from space, where it's terabytes of data that needs to be processed to if it's from infrared to visible and things like that. So yeah, you bring up a good point. Like we will probably, I mean, we need to innovate as quickly as possible so that we're not reaching like a critical mass. Because I mean, if you think about it, how like the sheer amount of data the internet has, the sheer amount of data we are processing every day, from satellite information to flights to, I mean, you name it. I mean, it's super important to keep to keep on the forefront of it, especially like if you're looking at defense, if you're looking at industries in this country. Like if you're wanting to stay competitive, quantum computing is the way to go. I mean, it sure seems like it. So yeah, that's a good point to bring up for sure.
I've heard that quantum computing, coupled with the idea of creating so-called suns, is like just on the horizon. I mean, because the future is quantum computing. We don't know how to get to it yet, but it's on the horizon. But like in terms of energy production, actually, I totally forgot to talk about this earlier, but I've heard about and read about a project in China where they're using plasma and radiation to actually like make microscopic versions of suns that will like actually emit energy greater than what you put in, or something like that.
Wow.
Like they're trying to make
that's
like
interesting.
It'd be
Yeah,
interesting
it's
to learn about
crazy.
that from a thermodynamic perspective, because that sounds kind of wonky. But
Yeah, that doesn't
Oh, well,
sound
no,
real.
I obviously the energy is going to equal each other, but in terms of production, like what they're like, I guess in terms of fuel, like they have I don't know exactly how it works. I'm not gonna speak on it, but like they're basically it's really interesting because they're able to just like it's like a gun almost. It's like we need some energy. Let's just fire up like a sun real quick, and it was really interesting. I'm not
Wow.
too familiar with it though.
Yeah, I haven't heard about that. That's pretty sick if that's true. Like yeah, that would change some things.
Or maybe that's some communist propaganda. I don't know.
It's
wow, maybe the energy market will be BYOS someday. So bring your own sun.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Oh, that's funny.
Real quick, I guess just like one other question I had that'd be good for discussion with y'all is just, I guess maybe like transportation uses of energy. So, obviously from electricity generation, we kind of covered that, but then from a broader energy perspective, I believe like 80% of our total energy usage in the U.S. comes from fossil fuels. So whether that be coal, natural gas, I think about 11% coming from renewables, and then the balance being made up of nuclear. So, I think oil obviously has been used significantly in transportation. Now we're seeing like an electrification of the transportation network, so kind of moving away from that. So I can certainly see how there might be a transition away from the usage of oil in the transportation sector. But then again, pretty much all of our plastics and so many other materials are made from naphtha and like these other oil feedstock substances. And so, I guess is y'all's outlook for energy one in which there's continued electrification of our transportation networks, or using less oil for transportation specifically, but then we're continuing to use oil as a feedstock for so many of these like important substances that we make, not just plastics, but like toothpaste, like all these different things are based from oil products. So what's y'all's general outlook for that? And if you also want to discuss like some supply chain issues with these rare earth elements, the majority of which are mined in China now, like neodymium, which is critical to production of batteries, production of solar panels, and wind turbines. Yes, like renewable energy has unlimited upside in terms of like the pure energy generation process, but then in terms of building out that infrastructure required for like there is obviously a finite amount of these rare earth elements, but then there's sourcing concerns with especially like the U.S. essentially producing very little to no rare earth elements anymore. Now they're all producing essentially China and Australia to a lesser extent, but yeah, what are y'all's outlooks just on those couple of topics?
I think you raised a really good point about like oil, because well, I've seen a graph like just 1 barrel of crude oil, all the products we get from it is insane. Like so much of our daily use stuff. So like a lot of people that are like climate change activists don't realize like even if we stop like all this type of like fracking and stuff, we still need to find a way to get oil, because like even electric things use oil. The motors within Teslas have oil in them. Like it's all necessary for our way of life. And I think that with the transportation services, it's really interesting because we talk about like trains and like and cars and making everything like EV has been like the hot topic, especially in like the stock market. The EV bubble is becoming a concern. And I mean, it's surprisingly a lot of times like the mining, as you mentioned, as well as like just all of the things that go into an EV can sometimes be worse like with climate than oil and gas. And it's like with like a battery is a very critical component, and it's also a very difficult component to create. And you know, it almost feels like you're picking poison, right? Like how, in what way are we going to destroy the earth? Because like mining for lithium specifically has been controversial because they found underwater, like in like the beds of the ocean, like an incredible amount of deposits for lithium, but mining that would destroy a lot of the environment, and specifically like underwater, and not to mention like all the problems that come along with mining above ground, with you know child labor and like all that type of like slavery and whatnot. So it's a really difficult problem to solve, but I think that we're going to continue towards EV just because it feels better and nicer and cleaner. Recently, I read Rolls-Royce. They actually came out with an electric engine for a plane, and it's like one of the world's fastest planes. I think it's something crazy like 387. I don't know exactly how fast it was going, but it was really fast. And
yeah, that's fast.
And so like a lot of our transportation services are going electric, but there are certain services that can't, right? Like obviously with like spaceships, like you need to displace a large amount of mass very quickly at a continuous rate. And I don't think, I mean, well, obviously there'll be innovations and engineering in the future, but we don't know a better way to send stuff into the atmosphere and past into space besides like these types of materials of oil and gas and natural gas.
Yeah, I think one of its attractive characteristics is its portability, and specifically its weight to power ratio. I mean, right now, like we're seeing continual improvements in battery technology, but just the weight of batteries that you would need to like theoretically build like a transatlantic aircraft, like or capable of making a transit, right? It's just ridiculous. And versus like oil, yeah, it's pretty heavy. Fuel is far and away like the number one cost for airlines, but jet fuel has just an incredible power to weight ratio that right now it can't be matched with anything else. And yeah, like there probably will be technological innovation, but I think that's like one of the key characteristics of oil that makes it so attractive, and that's what drove the transportation revolution that we saw first with automobiles, and then subsequently with aircraft and spacecraft. Like that's all driven by oil.
Yeah, and on top of that, like in the future, there's going to be, like Alex, you were just talking about with EV, but also just, I mean, there's going to be an incredible amount of chips being. I mean, I forget the exact stats, but like from just the past 10 years, like IoT or Internet of Things devices is like blown up like on a quadratic scale, like
skyrocketed.
Yeah, and like with that come a lot of rare earth elements that need to be mined. Obviously, silicon is pretty common, but you have gold, I think gold is one of the most the rarest ones, but I forget that there's other rare earth elements that go into making those chips.
Copper
Yeah, and copper. Yeah, I was trying to
for
think
the
of
wiring.
the other one, but and you know, with that, like, how do you develop a serious supply chain for it? Like, and you know, what happens if it breaks down, or like, you know, as we saw last year with COVID, like, I mean, look how quickly it could cripple an industry or multiple industries that in some way, shape, or form rely on computing. So it's a really interesting development, because like, if you do anything pretty much now in the modern world in any industry, you're going to rely on some form with electronics. Like, I don't care what you do, like even at the like the most the first, I guess, step in the supply chain where you're mining, you're using machines that most likely are programmed to mine a certain way, drill in a certain depth. You know, so you're never going to escape that, at least right now, with semiconductor chips. So if that part breaks down in terms of production, then you know what's left. Like, that's a serious issue. So
I think it's also important for us to to like have our perspective include space, because like for example, like all of us here are aware of like China's state controlled government, and I mean they're making smart plays. It's hard to admit, but they're making really interesting and good plays for themselves. And one of them is they've been investing heavily in space, and they're looking to have like a mile long like spaceship in orbit a couple years. But they're also already working on mining asteroids for rare earth metals to not even worry about the problems that we have on Earth. So like,
wow.
we have to keep space in perspective, because like everything out there in space is almost identical to what we have here, just you know, in different evolutions of time.
Gotcha.
Like we'll find all the metals there, same as we have here.
Yeah.
Cool. That's, I mean, there's all sorts of issues that are probably going to come up pretty quickly, you know, in the near future. So
No, that's the thing. I mean, asteroid mining just is an interesting parallel around that. But yeah, I mean, theoretically, if we could find a way to just outsource our, you know, rare earth elements that we need for all these processes, yeah, that'd be huge. And you know, and I guess just kind of harkening back to that earlier point, like we right now, like we view a Prius or you know, just really any electric vehicle as being the cleanest form of transportation. It's like, yeah, I mean, that is true. Like maybe on the surface, but I think you need to look at like energy production and energy usage as a process. It's not doesn't just occur at one point in time. There's so many inputs that go into it. And, you know, regarding just the Prius battery itself, there's so many toxic substances in it. It's like, oh, if you looked at the place where all the elements going into your battery were mined, like you'd probably have a different view of it. And even regarding, I think they actually did a study in California regarding the usage of electric vehicles and whether that was actually truly better for the environment from a perspective. And they determined that in a lot of places, like the electricity that's actually going into you know, the battery of an electric vehicle, like a lot of that's actually sourced from coal. And so it's saying like those overall, like those vehicles are less efficient and worse for the environment than a typical gas-powered car. So I think it's important to keep in mind that like energy is a process, and that you have to keep track of all the inputs and not just the end results of having electric car.
Wow.
It doesn't immediately emit carbon dioxide or these other elements, but you know, we have a broader perspective of it. So.
Yeah, I mean, I keep forgetting. I remember us reading something about that a few years ago, and yeah, that's wild. Like, you know, for something that's marketed as something so green and clean and all that, like for that to go down like the polar opposite of what you picture, that's yeah, it's wild.
I think the study concluded that in a grid in which at least 50% or more of the electricity is coal-based, like electric vehicles are actually significantly worse for the environment than a traditional gas. Now, obviously, like with that, it's like, okay, like we're not it's gonna have, or say like a coal power.
Right.
That's a real consideration right now.
Right. Huh. That's crazy.
I will give it to Tesla though, because they do like have Tesla Solar. Like they do try to help people to become independent from the grid in terms of EV. But like then you got the problem with batteries. Like you got the storage of like the solar energy, and that's another problem. I think all around it's like it's kind of a catch-22. Like how we're no matter what, we're going to be taking from this earth some resources, and we have to figure out how to best allocate and increase our capabilities, and while spreading social justice across the human race.
Yeah, it's a balance that it's always in flux. It seems like it's hard to strike one. So yeah, I'm with you.
All right, y'all ready to close this and start talking about the homework for the next episode, and also give some thank yous to Chris.
Yeah, I really appreciate you joining us, Chris. Like this is a really cool discussion, and a good change of pace, because the past couple podcasts, we were kind of talking about online things. So we're glad to have someone who has a different perspective on a really important topic. So yeah, appreciate it, man.
Of course, no, the pleasure is all mine, and thank y'all for your time.
Sweet.
No, for real. Thank you for talking with us, and Chris, I gotta tell you, I'm sorry about your dog. I totally forgot about that. I shouldn't have put this commercial break in. I didn't mean to bring back that memory.
No, you're good. We're just we're commemorating his memory. So this is honoring.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you want to introduce it? Sorry.
Yeah, no, sure. So our next topic is going to be the domestication of livestock, and the song that we're recommending y'all to listen to is Cardiac Arrest by Bad Sons. And then along with that, what we recommend you to read is Our Furry Friends, The History of Animal Domestication. And finally, we're going to watch a video about zebras versus horses, and in terms of animal domestication, which that'll be really interesting, because evolutionists and also biologists and like we don't necessarily know why zebras have those stripes yet. We're still trying to figure that out.
Oh, that'll be a cool topic to talk about for sure.
Absolutely. And Ian, do you want to close us out with the challenge of the week?
Yeah. So this is just a kind of a basic one. I think you should just do any week, not just next week. But we're all gonna eat like probably way more calories than we should this coming week. So try getting some steps in every day. Do the speed walking or treadmill. I don't know. I don't care. Just getting some steps every day this week, and try to get that heart pumping a little bit. And just keep in mind that exercise is always important. So I know I sounded kind of like a mom there, but hey, it's important. So obviously like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, all that good stuff. And thank you, Chris, and thank you everybody for tuning into our podcast, and join us next time. Keep it real, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank y'all.